The Dane and Derek Show is an uncensored, unfiltered podcast. Content warnings can be found in the episode description. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dane and Derek Show, a podcast where two nerdy friends keep in touch and shoot the shit. My name is Benig-Aiello. I'm a writer, director, and avid tabletop RPG player, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Dane.
Hey, I'm Dane. I'm a writer, musician, podcaster, and lover of tabletop RPGs, and also a person who ate a lot of cheese with my omelet just a moment ago before I sat down to record. So I'm very sorry if I sound very phlegmy. Because, yeah, you're not supposed to do that. When I was in college and in a bunch of choirs, I got a little chewed out by one of my professors for showing up with a London Fog, like a tea latte with milk in it. Oh, so good. But she was like, "Hey, no, you're not coming to choir. You can do that after, because it gums up your vocal cords like way more than you think."
Yeah.
And my tea is too hot to start clearing them yet. So, little phlegmy. How are you?
I'm okay. Oh goodness. I ate a lot of bread today, like right before this. So I'm feeling like really sluggish. And I think I'm crashing from having had 4 coffees today.
Oh, dude.
It's been a long day. I had to go to work early and have been running around all day. 'Cause I'm getting ready to film a movie this weekend, and there's just been a lot of things to do. And so
Hell yeah.
lots of caffeine, lots of bread, and yeah.
Okay, I get the caffeine bit, but why the bread? Like, what about...
There are these like buns that I get from the Filipino bakery.
Oh.
And they have coconut fillings or ube fillings, and I defrosted some thinking that, I will work through it over the course of the week. That was like a week ago, and I'm like, I need to eat these fast because I do not want to waste precious sweet bread. So
your mom and your nanny once made those for us. I remember this because that shit was so fucking good.
It is so good. It is too good to pass up, especially when you buy it fresh at 7 o'clock in the morning, which now that the weather's cold, I can do that and then mail it to my mom, and it'll get there and still be fresh, which is pretty insane to think about our mailing system.
It is kind of wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
I will say I have a lot of negative feelings about LA, which I've aired on this show before, but one of them is definitely not that the food sucks.
Oh yeah.
The food is so fucking good.
Yeah.
But damn, that sounds so good.
I know.
The food out here in Boulder and Denver is pretty good, relatively speaking, but it's just not Mecca of the world good, LA is... I almost hate to say that LA is one of the great cities of the world, but at least population and money and culture wise, it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, the food there is just awesome. If for no other reason than just the amount of people means that you're going to get so much good, authentic food.
100%. Well, I don't have a good segue into this
Asian
topic.
Foods, mark?
Yes, Asian foods. Yeah, and then I guess neither of us ate cabbage. So
when was the last time I had? Oh, I had a delicious coleslaw just a couple days ago that was half Brussels sprouts, half cabbage, so it was better for you, and it was so good. It was so good.
Very nice.
Yeah. Okay. So cabbages,
yeah. Sorry to all the cabbage merchants out there. We haven't been eating that much cabbage, and when we do have cabbage, Dane puts it in a slaw or has it in a slaw. So if you can't have guessed what we're talking about, we are talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender today.
Such a good show.
Yeah. I think it's one of those shows that, for me at least, it was something that, growing up, it always escaped me because I didn't have cable, so I didn't actually see it when it was airing. I saw it as an adult.
Interesting. I didn't see it as it was airing either because actually I didn't have cable growing up really either.
Oh wow.
But I did watch it as it sort of came out because the moment a new DVD with a batch of episodes, usually 4 to 5 of them, came out, I would get it. I would go buy it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so like I kept up. Like it was a show that released for me, but in a weird way,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, and it was I started watching it when I was 9 or 10, about so like prime age for it, and it was like it was seminal. Like it was so important to me growing up. Like I don't talk about it quite as much because unlike something like Star Wars or Calvin and Hobbes, I don't see its influence on like the things I do now quite as overtly. It's more like sunk in kind of like a more subtle way. But like the animation and the characters and bending so fucking cool. Like it was awesome. I'm surprised with the amount of like uh like martial arts you've done in your life that it didn't come for you sooner, because like it's like the epitome of what like martial arts could be, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. It was just one of those things where I think everyone around me really loved the show. Like you loved it, Taylor loved it. I mean, I would say to say loved it at in talking about it, but probably still love it. I know Taylor still loves it, and I know yeah we talk about it all the time. Yeah, it just always escaped my grasp, I think, growing up. And it wasn't until I was like 20 that I finally sat down and watched the whole show. I had to like find clips of it and like watch it whenever there were like free episodes on like nick.com or whatever.
Hmm.
Cause like I didn't have cable. But I think it's like interesting watching the show, I think, as an adult, because I think it was one of those things in my head. I was like, oh, this would be something fun to make as like a filmmaker one day, right? Like that, I think was something big I took away from it.
Hmm.
And it was kind of interesting just seeing just how, I guess, just how like well it's such like an anomaly of a show, you know? Um, like like it's such a mature show for it being a kid's show.
Yeah, yeah, it does not talk down to its audience at all.
Yeah. And it's got some like pretty great name actors that are in it. Mark Hamill, Mako, Dante Bosco,
Hmm.
to name a few. And like it's also just one of those shows that I remember. I think it's like pretty universally beloved, Like there
Yeah.
isn't a lot of negative criticism I see surrounding it, which is super interesting. you know I feel like very very rarely do we find like a kids show that is so beloved like how Avatar is.
This is true. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they didn't talk down to their audience, right? Like
Hmm.
they don't dumb down the story. They like, but they also like approach people where they're at, and they just told it honestly. You know, it's a story about young people, but it is not a story that is dumbed down in an attempt to make it work for young people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the difference between I'm like trying to think. It's like the difference between Johnny Test and this, right? Like
Yeah.
Johnny Test is like there's really nothing. There's like really the story there is like made the story there is made very clearly for kids of a certain demographic, and the themes of the show are very one-off, episodic, not quite like Avatar having, being an episodic serialized show, which was like pretty new for the time. There weren't a lot of animated shows that were like that.
No, no, especially it can be watched episodically. Like most of the episodes can be watched on their own for sure, but you're definitely missing something if you do it
Yeah.
that way. It's a show that is meant to be watched in order. It I think part of it is that it's a grand adventure and grand narrative for younger people, um in a medium that usually doesn't respect them enough to do that for them. I think the other kind of amazing thing about it is that it is and was its own property,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's its own thing, right? Like it's not based off of like a book series. It's not based off of a movie that came out. It's not even like Transformers or He-Man or She-Ra where it's based off of toys or it's meant to sell toys, right? Um it was designed from the ground up to just do its own fucking thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think it and so many shows owe so much to it, right? From like Steven Universe to Adventure Time to like Gravity Falls, all these other the new She-Ra, honestly. I just finished watching the new She-Ra and I was like, this is very Avatar the Last Airbender in like all wonderful ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like down to the fact that the first few episodes feel kind of campy in the way the first few episodes of Last Airbender felt kind of campy.
Yeah.
Um, except for the one where they dealt with genocide. Yeah, it's like it's almost so it's kind of hard to almost approach it. Like, where do you start? Do you begin with like the fact that it's like a genuine epic, or do you begin with like how beautiful the animation is? Um, I think something we should do. Favorite character.
Oh yeah. Prince Zuko.
Yeah, that's fair. That as far as correct answers go, that's the correct answer. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I get torn between Katara and Iroh, but one of them.
Also correct answers. I think, especially like, I think those are the characters that have like incredibly big transformations. Well, maybe not Iroh, but
No,
Iroh
Iroh's
is Iroh's pretty consistent.
he's consistent, but he's so lovable, and he
Yes.
is in many ways the moral touchstone for the show.
Yes.
He like don't get me wrong, like all of the characters have a good moral compass, really. Even Zuko, it's why he struggles. Is that he has a heart and empathy and a moral compass in a society and in a role that demands he does not. Um but when they get confused, Iroh is the person they come back to. Right.
Yeah. Always.
So here's an additional question. Favorite comic relief character? The answer cannot be Sokka because he's actually a protagonist. Uh,
Favorite comic relief character. I think hmm I think I'd have to say like Momo.
solid
Yeah.
choice. For me, it's got to be the Boulder.
Oh yeah, the boulder.
Yeah. Um. Okay. I'm gonna do just some
Yeah,
favorites.
go
Keep
for it,
going
go
on
for it.
favorites. Favorite episode.
Oh, it's season 3 and it's the dream episode where Aang's nightmare, I think it's called,
Oh,
where he,
Nightmares and Daydreams.
yeah, nightmares and daydreams.
Wow, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, and it's like it is because it's like it is so funny and it is so like just wild, and I think I love the sort of like hallucination of Appa and Momo
Having an
being like
anime samurai duel.
samurai battle. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something about that that is just like incredible to me that like I think it's just like they summed up an entire relationship between those two characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next one after that is Zuko alone.
Zuko alone is my pick as far as total start to finish episode.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's
fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah,
Like the fact that like the battle where he mostly uses swords at first, like it's just so brutal to watch. Um
hmm
it's I love it. I love it so much. And like the fact that it's a western and like how they like it's literally the only episode that I think that has only one protagonist in it.
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of the episodes are the A plot either deals with Aang or Zuko, and then the B plot deals with the other. Um, or occasionally it's like Katara is really the protagonist of this episode, or Sokka or whatnot. But that's like there's a reason Zuko got his own episode. Um,
Yeah. I think it really primes the audience to sort of see the transformation that he is undergoing,
yes,
in,
definitely.
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next.
Hmm.
Top couple of moments, not episodes, but moments. I
Oh yeah, you
I
go
can I
first.
can I can go I can give you a couple to give you a second to think because
Yeah,
I made this list, so I've been thinking about it all day. Um
yeah.
uh Iroh singing Little Soldier Boy.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
every time I watch it, it gets worse.
Yeah.
Every time. Um the first time Toph uses the seismic sense, like the first time we get to see that,
Mm-hmm.
so cool. Um and then I think Katara stopping the rain maybe is up there.
Oh yeah.
Um yeah. I'll give those three because we could go on, but I want to
Oh yeah.
give you your top here.
Yeah, I think my top moment is when also rain related when Zuko is yelling at the lightning to strike him. Uh
Oh,
yeah.
you've never held back before.
Yep. Exactly. And then, to pair that when Zuko redirects lightning against his father.
Oh,
Also really great. Um and then uh man, they're all Zuko moments. When Zuko and Aang see all the colors of fire.
that one's
Um,
really good.
yeah.
I'll say that as far as like fights go, Zuko and Katara versus Azula at the end.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then I'm a sucker for last minute power ups to save the day. Um, so Aang getting the Avatar state right at the end there,
Yeah.
and then choosing Mercy is just like chef's kiss. So good.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. Like he finds a way to avoid the thing that's been haunting him all three seasons,
exactly.
and it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I love any fight with Jet. Uh,
Oh, Jet is so good.
yeah, Jet's the best, and then I think I think another good solid choice for an episode and just an episode as a whole, which has some great fights, is when Saka meets the Swordmaster.
Ooh, those are really good. Those are
Yeah,
really, really good.
yeah. There's a lot of intricacy to the fighting with the sword play that I think is really interesting, and that is like
Yes.
really beautifully sort of like
Choreographed.
choreographed. Yeah, and of
Yeah.
course, yeah, the last Agni Kai. Like, there's like,
The music in that one.
yeah,
Mm.
and just like like Uncle Iroh kind of sets like the stage for it when he says like, not many firebenders get to experience this kind of power, you know?
Yeah.
And then you get to just see how like explosive like the fire is, just how much fire they're fighting with.
Hmm.
And like compared to every other Agni Kai that you've seen Zuko like go through, this one is of course like you're just it's a nail biting episode
And it's
or nail
so
biting fight.
there's a weird piece to it almost. That
Yeah.
one where you can like sense Zuko's peace,
Hmm.
right? Like his inner peace, and it's only shattered when he thinks someone else is in danger.
Yeah.
I just think that's really beautiful. Um, okay, two questions. What kind of
Uh-huh.
bending do you want? And what bending do you think you relate to is the one you'd have?
Okay, yeah. What kind of bending I would want would be air bending.
Fair.
And what kind of bending I think I relate to is uh or the bending that I think I have or whatever would be fire, I think.
Mm.
Yeah. Um
Why?
I think because like I think like I want air bending because not only would it be really cool to fly, but there's a lot of sort of like I think there's a lot of interesting philosophy there with like detaching from the world, that is interesting,
Hmm.
that I think they go into in later seasons of the show. And there's something very playful about airbending that I like. Um, and then I think I go back and forth between fire and earth, and I think I've settled on fire as the one that I would probably have, because fire is like, there's a duality to fire.
Hmm.
It can be very, it can be dangerous, but it can also be beautiful. And I think that, like, as like an artist, like, you're always going back and forth with your emotions, and I think that fire definitely speaks to that in a way. You know,
Yeah.
how about you?
I want Earth mostly because I'd love to have that connection to like the world and be able to like it's the one that lets you mess with the environment the most, in a sense.
Yeah.
Um and the extension bendings, so to speak, like the metal and lava are very cool to me.
Oh
Um
yeah.
but I think I'm water. Um
Mm,
due to the fact that like I I'm I find myself to be pretty adaptable. Um but in the same hand, I am pretty ruled by my emotions. Like if you like see Katara, like Katara's bending, like especially early on before she like masters it and herself in a sense.
yeah.
Like when she loses her temper, everything kind of falls out of control. Um,
Hmm.
which I can relate to in a big way.
Yeah.
Um,
Huh, that's funny that we got all four elements.
yep. Balance. Anyways,
Yeah.
so real quick before we've kind of touched on what it means to both of us right at the beginning, so I won't come back around to that too much. But like, does it have like kind of looking back on it now? I feel like it's a show about it's a story about mercy and healing. Um,
Yes.
in a way, I find very few shows, movies, etc. to be about.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, ultimately, it's about forgiveness, right? Like so often do the characters apologize to one another, which, like, you don't really see on a lot of shows. Usually the main character, no matter how much wrong they do, they're always still right in the end. Like,
right.
even if they make a wrong decision, there's still some reason why that wrong decision is justified. And I think that this show does a really good job at kind of allowing every character to ask for forgiveness for something they've done or something they've said. And I think that, yeah, to your point, Mercy, like, like, it's a, it is a kid's show, so they don't really kill people on camera, but there is loss, and there are consequences to actions.
Hmm.
And I think that it plays with that, with the morality of, um, like, the chosen one destiny,
Right.
um, in a very interesting way. So
I I think it's very interesting to me the fact that nobody in this show is beyond redemption.
yeah, yeah,
Um, like
like,
and
even
the
the boulder.
only yes, and the only times in which someone is shown to be fully villainous is when they refuse truly and fully refuse redemption.
Yeah,
Um, Azula is made out to be a tragic figure, and we don't get quite enough with her in the show to see if she chose or not. But like Admiral Zhao in the first season refuses Zuko's help.
yeah,
And in that way, we see that is the true villainy is the inability and unwillingness to try and see your own wrongs and then make right on them. And part of that in Zhao's case is like an unwillingness to continue living to face his mistakes, right?
yeah,
And then Ozai at the very end, right? Because Aang shows him true mercy, and he tries to strike him again.
Yeah.
Um, and never repents, never anything, right? Um, whereas like everyone else, and also it's very loving towards people who have worked so hard to be better, right? Like
Yeah.
it's only briefly touched upon, but like Iroh fucked up a lot,
Yeah.
right? He was a fascist uh, warmonger who broke into Ba Sing Se and got his own son killed. And
Yeah.
that's what it took to wake Iroh up, right?
Hmm.
Like it's easy to forget that, but Iroh's empathy and belief in Zuko's ability to rise above, in his belief in Aang and all of his friends, and in the world itself, it stems from a place of pure empathy due to the fact that he has made as many mistakes as anyone.
Yeah.
Um, right? Like, how many people did Iroh get killed in that campaign? Truly, like if you think about
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah.
Um, and in that way, it is so important to see that, and it's so subtle, but it is also not ignored or underplayed, if that makes sense. It's just
Hmm.
something that's already happened, you know, and it's
Yeah.
not his story, so they don't it's not the whole focus, right?
Hmm.
um so before we run out of time, I do want to bring attention to one thing.
Yeah.
And you're a great person to actually talk to this about. uh One of the big criticisms of the show, because in many ways it's a work that is pretty, I don't want to go so far as to say flawless, but it is universally acclaimed, and the gripes with it are pretty minor or pretty much based on people's personal taste. It's not a
Yeah.
it's very hard to find something technically wrong with this show. Um,
Right.
However, it is a show about Asian cultures, numerous Asian cultures, like relatively speak, like pretty pan Asian cultures. Even considering the width and breadth that Asian encompasses, which is honestly, it's such a ridiculous term because like sorry, that's a discussion for another time. But like it is a show made by white dudes. The cast is mostly white, like, and like
Hmm. Yeah.
early 2000s, I guess, but like in looking at the show, there is some parts of it that I think, you could argue are appropriative, and versus the fact that also like every basically every character is more or less a person of color, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like I don't really know where I stand on that, but I'm curious where you stand on it, because you approached it both as an adult and as the people that they potentially appropriated and or represented. I'm very curious. I was like, what
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
Derek's
Yeah.
thoughts on this?
No. Yeah. I have a handful of thoughts because I think it's a mixed bag, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, if it was it's like this show compared to the movie, of course, is well, the movie did a lot of whitewashing, um and of course it got a lot of flack for that, whereas this show, there's a level of, I think, um universality, if that's even a word, that you can get with animation, right? Like that you can't get with live action. And I think that, unlike a lot of other sort of Asian themed things that were coming out at the time, um, like, for instance, like a beloved Bioware property, Jade Empire,
Hmm.
like as much as I love that game definitely has some problems about how it portrays Asian people played by you know white people. um, and I think that this show, I know that there are, I know that like while the creators are not Asian, I know that a good majority of the crew and some of like the story designers were Asian.
Right.
And I think that, that helps, right? And of course you've got Mako and Dante Bosco, like two of the greatest like Asian American actors. And probably a big reason why I relate to Prince Zuko is because when I found out Prince Zuko was played by a Filipino guy, I definitely relate to that.
Hmm.
Um, I think that there's a level of care that this property has that a lot of other properties don't have.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that like when you look at something like when you look at the many failed like American versions of Voltron where they kind of whitewash the animation in a way, um, there's that's a little bit more problematic in my mind versus like a show that's trying to do something different. And I think it can get a little bit weird when you think about it in the terms of like you know white people bringing something to the US, right? And I don't think that's what they were trying to do. They synthesized something from, a collection of ideas and histories and mythologies that I think ended up being really good. I think
Hmm.
where things get complicated is when you talk about Avatar in the context of like the Legend of Korra, uh, you know? And I think that's when like things start to get weird with Nickelodeon and the property. And when you start to think about the show in a broader sense of like, how they've kind of changed some of the designs of the characters to make them appear more, you know, white versus Asian. And I think that's when things get kind of weird.
Hmm.
But overall, I do think that Avatar, The Last Airbender, I think part of why it doesn't set off a sort of like red flag in my brain is that it's not pointing to any one specific Asian culture. Um it's not like you don't have any of the white cast doing a stereotypical Asian accent.
No.
um it's not like if you were casting, it's not like if you're doing Yellowface in a way, like in a live action movie. And I think that is what I think sets it a little bit apart. I think that's like the big line, right? That's the thin line that it falls on. It's kind of like how, and I think that's that's like the whole thing with animation, right? It's like, because it's just a voice that is playing a character, it can be very difficult to kind of pin down where do you draw that line for who you cast. And I think especially like when you look at the media around that time, there wasn't a lot of like Asian American like kid shows. There was maybe like Jake Long, American Dragon,
Hmm.
um, and eventually Shaolin Showdown, um, which are both great shows. And so there's not a lot of it. And I think like Avatar itself, I think is I think overall it doesn't insult anybody. And I think that that's what makes it good, is that it knows it knows that it is a fantasy show, and it doesn't try to pretend to be anything but a fantasy show. And um I think that it is definitely like an anomaly in that it kind of rides a fine line, but it sticks to it pretty good. It's kind of like how Moana isn't based on any one particular Pacific Island, culture. It's
Sure.
an amalgamation of them all,
Yeah.
and like a fantasy story within that. And I think that it's the Disney treatment, and I think to an extent that's fine, that's good. Um, I don't think something like that could happen again unless the care was taken, right? Like, and that's a big part of why I think the movie kind of bombs, because it's not holding true to that sort of
Yeah, there are problems. Many
Yeah, and that's
problems.
kind of like, like with the new Netflix show that like, Daniel Day Kim just got cast as Fire Lord Ozai. And that's incredible, right? Like he's an incredible actor and he has a voice on the caliber of Mark Hamill's. And so I think it's going to be fantastic to see that, right? And like, um, like I think they cast a Filipino Canadian kid as Aang, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, that's super cool, and it's going to be super interesting to see what the sort of future of Avatar as a property becomes in this day and age versus like when it came out. I think because when it came out was like 2003 to like 2006, which is like right
No, it
in the
was
middle of
2005 to 2008, I think.
okay, so yeah, so that's like right in the middle of like sort of like a lot of like Asian centric video games coming out, and a lot of like
Yeah.
an uptick in like like the Ten Rings or whatever. No, it's that
Uh,
one samurai like RPG that's like
oh, Five Rings.
Five Rings.
Ten
Yeah,
Rings
Five
is
Ring.
Shang-Chi right now.
Right.
And then yeah,
Yeah.
and like also, like there was like the big uptick in anime consumption and like
Yes.
Toonami and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's all bundled in there. I yeah, I think that there are lots of complicated things to go with it, but I think it like I appreciate your take that it's like a net positive while acknowledging, what is in front of you.
Yeah. Like it's definitely not perfect. Like there's definitely some things where like yeah, they, probably could have involved, you know, m- more this, more that, or done less this, less that. But I think they pull. It's just like how like I think that they pulled just enough to make it what it is without you know outright insulting the culture. And I
I
think yeah,
I'm curious what you think of this. Do you feel like they at least did their homework?
yes, I
Okay.
think
All
I
right.
think they did their homework.
Yeah.
And I think what is also good about this is that like yeah, like they didn't try to draw like yes, they drew some distinctions to different Asian cultures, but they kind of, they melded and mished and mashed and ultimately I don't think they yeah, I think they were more inspired by Asian culture than they were by kung fu movies. I'll say that. And I think that's probably the biggest difference between that and a lot of other American media that is Asian focused, that is
Hmm.
not made by Asian Americans, right? Like I think that
Right.
that's the big difference, right? It's two people and a lot of other people that have a huge admiration for Asian culture and Asian history and Asian mythology versus a bunch of guys that just love kung fu movies that want to make their version of an Asian kung fu movie story. And I think I think that's what I've spent the last 10 minutes trying to say, Dane. um, is that's the biggest difference between Avatar, The Last Airbender, and so many other properties that came out in that 2005 to 2008. Let's, like, because there were a lot of like Journey to the West type medias that came out around that time. And a lot of them are more inspired by kung fu movies than they are by Asian culture and mythology. And I think that that's the big difference.
Okay. Nice.
There we go. Is that all you had?
Yeah, no, that was the big finisher. That
All
was
right.
big
Well,
finish.
there you go, everybody. We just laid upon a mercy. And we're going to wrap up today's episode. So thank you all for listening this week. You can see what movies I'm watching on Letterboxd at Benig-Aiello. And Dane, where can we find you and your work?
You can find my work online. I was about to like, but you know, at danewrites.com on the website. I was like trying to be like on the thing, because I
Yeah,
mean, my work's on Substack and Bandcamp and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and, you know, stuff. But like danewrites.com, it's all there.
there you go. Well, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you next week.
Catch you later.